The town of Blackridge had many stories, but none was whispered more often than the legend of the midnight ghost train. For decades, the old railway station sat abandoned at the edge of town. Rusted tracks stretched into the dark forest, disappearing beneath twisted trees and thick fog. No trains had run there since the terrible accident in 1952 when a passenger train vanished during a violent storm. Or at least, that's what people said. But every year, on the same date as the accident, some residents claimed they heard a train whistle echoing through the night. 16-year-old Daniel Carter didn't believe in ghosts. One evening, while sitting with his friends outside the local diner, the topic came up again. "You know, tonight is the night," said Maya, lowering her voice dramatically. "The ghost train passes at midnight." Daniel laughed. "A ghost train? Seriously?" "It's probably just the wind." "Then prove it," said Jake. "Go to the old station at midnight." The group fell silent. Daniel smirked. "Fine, I'll go." At 11:47 p.m., Daniel reached the abandoned station. The moon hid behind thick clouds, and the forest around him was silent. The platform boards creaked as he stepped onto them. A broken station clock still hung on the wall, frozen at 12:03. Daniel checked his phone. 11:58 p.m. "See?" he muttered. Nothing. Then the wind changed. A low rumble echoed in the distance. Daniel frowned. That sounded like train wheels. The fog thickened over the tracks. Then suddenly, hoo-oo! A train whistle screamed through the darkness. Daniel's heart pounded as a beam of pale light appeared far down the tracks. Slowly, a train emerged from the mist. But something was wrong. The locomotive looked old, ancient, even. Its metal body was scratched and rusted. The windows glowed faintly with a strange blue light. And there was no driver. The train screeched to a stop at the platform. The doors slid open. No one stepped out. Instead, Daniel heard faint voices whispering from inside the train. Against his better judgment, Daniel walked closer. Inside the train car were passengers sitting silently in their seats. But they weren't normal. Their clothes looked like they were from another time, 1950s coats, hats, and dresses. Their faces were pale, almost transparent. One woman slowly turned her head toward him. Her eyes were empty. "Please," she whispered. Another passenger stood. "We never arrived." Daniel stumbled backward, terror flooding his body. The passengers began to rise from their seats one by one. "We're still traveling. We're still waiting. We can't leave." Suddenly a tall figure appeared at the end of the platform. A conductor in a dark uniform. His face was shadowed beneath a cap. "You shouldn't be here," the conductor said calmly. Daniel's voice shook. What is this?" "The last journey," the conductor replied. He looked toward the passengers. "They're trapped between places, between time. Why?" The conductor pointed down the tracks. "Because the train never reached its destination." The conductor opened his hand. Inside was an old brass pocket watch. "If someone boards the train, it may finally move again." Daniel stared at the ghostly passengers. They watched him silently, waiting. The wind howled through the empty station. The clock struck midnight. Daniel took a step toward the train, then another. But just as he reached the door, the whistle screamed again. The train began to fade. The conductor's voice echoed through the fog. Perhaps next year. The next morning, Daniel returned with his friends. The station looked exactly the same, broken, empty, silent, but something was different. Near the edge of the platform, lying on the ground, was an old brass pocket watch. The hands were frozen at 12 a.m., and carved into the back were the words, Blackridge Midnight Express minus 1952. Daniel looked down the tracks. For a moment, he thought he heard a distant train whistle. Daniel tried to forget what happened that night, but the pocket watch would not let him. Every morning he woke up to the same sound coming from his desk. Tick, tick, tick. The strange thing was, the watch had no battery and the hands were still frozen at 12 a.m., yet the ticking continued. Soon the dream started. Daniel found himself standing again at the abandoned Blackridge station. Thick fog covered the tracks, and the air smelled like cold metal and rain. Then he heard it, the train whistle. The ghost train slowly rolled into the station. But this time, the doors opened and the passengers were all staring directly at him, waiting. One of them spoke. "You almost boarded." Daniel tried to run, but his feet wouldn't move. The conductor appeared beside him again. "You were chosen," the conductor said quietly. Daniel woke up in a cold sweat. The pocket watch beside his bed ticked louder than ever. The next day, Daniel went to the town library. An old librarian named Mrs. Holloway helped him search through newspapers from 1952. Finally, they found the article. Blackridge train vanishes during midnight storm. The report said the train had 47 passengers and one conductor. Rescue teams searched the tracks for weeks, but the train was never found. Daniel kept reading. One line made his stomach drop. Witnesses reported seeing a teenage boy standing on the platform shortly before the train vanished. A teenage boy, standing exactly where Daniel had been. That night, Daniel returned to the station. He didn't tell his friends. The pocket watch had started ticking faster during the evening. By 11:59 p.m., the sound was almost like a heartbeat. Then the fog rolled in again, right on time. The rumble of wheels echoed through the darkness. The ghost train returned. The train stopped at the platform just like before. The doors opened slowly. But this time, the passengers were not sitting. They were all standing. And in the center of the train car was one empty seat. The conductor stepped forward. "You see now," he said. Daniel held up the watch. "Why me?" the conductor sighed. "Every year the train searches for someone to take the missing place." Daniel's heart pounded. "Missing place?" The conductor nodded. "The boy who was meant to board in 1952 never arrived." Daniel looked into the train. The passengers whispered together. "He must come. The train must move." Daniel turned the pocket watch over. Something new had appeared scratched into the back. It hadn't been there before. Seat 48. Daniel remembered the newspaper. 47 passengers and one conductor. There should have been 48 passengers. The seat was always meant for someone, for him. The conductor stepped aside. "You may leave," he said. "And the train will return again next year, but the passengers will remain trapped." Daniel looked at their pale faces. Decades of waiting. Decades of silence. Then he stepped onto the train. The door slammed shut behind him. The passengers slowly sat down. The empty seat was no longer empty. The conductor smiled for the first time. Finally, he blew the whistle. The train roared to life and disappeared into the fog. The next morning, when Daniel's friends arrived at the station the next day, he was gone. Only one thing remained. The old station clock had started working again. And it now read 12:01 a.m., 1 year later. On the anniversary of the accident, the townspeople heard something strange, a train whistle. But this time, there were 48 shadows in the windows, and one of them looked like a teenage boy waving from the glass.